First type of listening we want to talk about here, subjective listening. This is where you listen to what the person is saying, but you actually filter what they're saying through your own particular interest or experience or what's most important to you at that particular moment. So the client may come to you and say, I'm surprised we haven't had more offers by now. And you might reply something like, well, unfortunately, that's the market today. But did you see how many likes you got when I posted your listing on Instagram? Now, this may not seem like a really bad reply, and perhaps it's not bad, but there are better ways to reply, which we'll hear about in just a minute. But what I want to point out here is, remember that when a person comes to you and says something, it's because he or she has a particular need. It may be a clearly defined need in their mind, or it might not be. But they're coming to you because they want information, or they want guidance, or they just want to connect, or they want to vent. Any number of reasons might bring this person to you to initiate a conversation. And when that happens, if you take what is important to them that has stimulated their coming to you in the first place, and you turn it around and send it in a different direction, what you've actually done is stolen the conversation away from whatever it is that they feel is most important. This is the subjective piece of it. So in this particular case, the client comes to you because he or she is thinking about the number of offers that have come in. And in your response here, which may not sound like a bad one on the surface, what you've actually done is you've redirected the conversation to postings on Instagram, connection in a relationship here. But chances are this client didn't come to you to ask about how many likes there were on the posting in Instagram. If that's what he or she was interested in, that's what he or she would have said. Please remind me how many likes we got on Instagram. But that's not what this client said. This client said, I'm surprised we haven't had more offers by now. So as leaders of our business, as communicators who want to create an extraordinary experience, we can ask ourselves, I wonder what's behind this particular comment. That's what subjective listening is all about. If we can get behind the message, we're going to be talking about a different kind of listening in just a minute. The subjective listening is something we don't want to be doing very often. Let's move to the next one, objective listening. Objective listening is much better than subjective listening. In this case, you're hearing what it is the individual has to communicate neutrally and on its own terms. I'm surprised we haven't had. Yeah, me too. Honestly, I didn't expect that. This is a much better response and a much different response from the subjective one that we heard a minute ago. The reason is the subjective response made us or kind of compelled us to pull the speaker over to what was important to us, which was the Instagram posting. Maybe we felt we needed to defend ourselves. Maybe we felt that there was some kind of a challenge from the client that he was not happy with our particular way of handling the situation. In this case, we're not asking the client to move anywhere. We're simply meeting the client where he or she is. Yeah, I understand what you're saying about the surprise and number of offers, and I'm with you. I'm kind of trying to figure that out myself. At least in this particular case, you're meeting the client where he or she is. However, there's a drawback to this particular kind of listening too, and that is there's no particular insight into what might be behind the words. Now, I should say that objective listening is the kind of listening that we do probably about 80% of the time in the business world. Very straightforward, very transactional, and perfectly appropriate for most business situations. However, 10, 15, 20% of the time, there's going to be an opportunity for you to do a different kind of listening, which is what we call empathetic listening. Go ahead, Adriana. Empathetic listening is a different kind of listening again, and this is the most important one if you want to grow your business. In empathetic listening, we're hearing what it is the individual communicates, but we're looking behind the words, between the words, underneath the words, to try to understand what it is that generated that question or that comment in the first place. Because sometimes the message actually isn't in the words themselves. In this case, same comment again. I'm surprised we haven't had more offers by now. Here's a different response. Yeah, I can understand. I'd love to hear more about what you think about that. In this particular case, you've responded by saying, I'm interested in what you're interested in, and I want to hear more from you. And you can imagine if someone said something like this, I'd love to hear more about what you think about that. It might reveal that they sensed something behind the words in the first place. And if there is something behind the words and you connect with that, it's going to be a powerful experience of connection or being related to by your client. Imagine a scenario like this where your client is selling his house, and the reason he's selling his house is because he has a daughter who's going to college in a couple of months. He and his wife don't have a lot of money, and the way they're going to finance the college is by selling the house. And so here he is in June, and there haven't been very many offers coming in yet. He knows he's going to get that bill in August for like $28,000, and he doesn't have the money, and he needs the money. And so when he says to you, "I'm surprised we haven't had more offers by now," what he's really thinking is, "I'm getting worried about whether I can pay for my daughter's college or not." Now, if you really know your client, then you know this is the context behind his words or her words. If you don't know your client, this message could go right over your head. And this is the essence of empathetic listening. The ability we have as human beings to take ourselves out of our own space and our own self and our own experience and put ourselves into the shoes and the mind and the emotions of someone else that we happen to be with. It's a very powerful tool that we have available to ourselves that we don't actually make use of too often. But if you think of the kind of exceptional experiences you've had in your life with someone else at any time, anywhere, chances are someone was leaving his or her own shoes and meeting the other person where he or she was and connecting on that basis. So empathetic listening is our opportunity to make the most powerful impact on someone else. And do you think that this actually makes a difference or not? It absolutely makes every difference in the world. Do you think that you could get more people to walk through your particular business simply by listening more empathetically when the opportunity is there? Absolutely. I want to ask you, what is your particular batting average as far as like referrals go? What percentage of people walk through your business, walk through your door, already ready to do business with you, ready to hand you their money? I don't know what your batting average is, and I don't know what you think is possible. But I can say it's absolutely possible to run your whole business through referrals only. And I can say that because I've been doing it for the last 13 years. I became a coach in 2005, got certified then, started working with people. For the first couple of years, I was doing prospecting, I was doing marketing, I was doing whatever I could to try to get people to know who I am and what I do and try to create a positive experience for them. As the referrals started to come in, I started getting more and more and more. And after about 2 years, I started running the business without doing any more marketing at all. So for the last 13 years, I've done no prospecting, no marketing. I've had no website. People often say to me, "I can't even find you on the internet. Why aren't you on the internet?" The reason is my business is already full. I have the clients that I want to work with. And if I had a website, I just have more people I'd have to say no to. And so what I want to say to all of you is your best tool to be able to create more referrals is actually listening, not speaking. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to speak to people, but the strongest communication, the strongest connection that we have as human beings comes through listening. Imagine the important relationships in your life, the person you love, the person you married. Did you marry the person because he or she never listens to you? Probably not. Probably one of the things that made you fall in love with the person, at least in the beginning, was they were willing to give you the time of day. They were hanging on every word. They were listening to you. And you may be married to someone who doesn't listen to you all the time, but how would your life be different if that individual listened to you when you needed to be heard? And the reality is, for all of us in the business world, it's the same thing. We all want to be heard. We all want to be valued. We all want to be served. And empathetic listening situations where there's some kind of a message behind the message, or there's some kind of a context behind the message or question, that's what we need to tune into as individuals. Next slide, Adriana. So here's a question for you. What type of listener are you? Think only in your business setting here. Would you say you're primarily a subjective listener, an objective listener, or an empathetic listener? Please type into the chat.
You know, when you're empathetic, it's interesting when you ask these questions, David, who will be the first one to answer?
Right. And who's going to have the guts to say, you know what? Sometimes I'm subjective. So I'm seeing some empathetics there. I'm seeing some neutral, some objective. Looks like everyone's coalescing around empathetic or objective.
Subjective. One
Couple of
person,
subjective in there. Yep. A mixture of objective and empathetic.
a bit of all three.
Bit of all three. Yep. The reality is, folks, that none of us is one type of listener only. The reality is we're mixing all these types of listenings throughout the various relationships we have and at various given moments in time. The question maybe more accurate to ask is, what percentage of the time are you in subjective listening, or what percentage of the time are you in objective listening? I can tell you that being in subjective listening is almost always the wrong place to be. You almost always miss the right message. And the important thing is you're creating an experience of disconnect from a client. If a client comes to you for A and you give client B, what the client is experiencing is a disconnect. Not only are you not listening, you're worse than that. You're giving the client an experience of not being related to. And there's no possible way you're ever going to get more referrals that way. What you need to be doing is being in objective listening most of the time and being very sensitive and thoughtful about when there's an empathetic listening opportunity for you there. For example, let's say that a client comes to you and says, my son just scored 2 goals in soccer yesterday. And you say, that's great. Let me tell you what I'm going to do with the marketing for your house in the next 2 weeks. Again, what you've done is you've stolen the conversation away from your client, what it was that was important to him or her at that particular moment. You may think that the kid scoring 2 goals in soccer has nothing to do with selling the house, which perhaps it doesn't. And you may not care about soccer at all. You may not care about this guy's kids at all. But this guy cares about his kids at that moment. He's so compelled to talk about this experience of his son that he brings it to you. And if you're listening, if you're there with him or her, then you recognize that that's what you need to be talking about for a couple of minutes. And you could reply, instead of saying, let me tell you what I'm going to do to market your house for the next 2 weeks, you could say something like, 2 goals in 1 game? That's wonderful. It must be so exciting for you and your wife to watch him play. Does he play a lot? A question like that invites further input from your client. It tells your client that you want to know what's important to him or her. It helps that client have an unambiguous experience of being related to. And so we never want to let the empathetic listening opportunities go over our head. The challenge for us is to be sensitive to it enough to understand when that's happening. Next slide, please. So to kind of sum up this, what we want everybody to think about is clients have both transactional needs and relational needs. They're coming to you for the transaction. Absolutely. They want to sell the house. They want to move through the process. They want to get it done. Absolutely. You're the expert there and they're counting on you for that expertise. But along the way, in this months-long conversation that you're going to have, this relationship, there's going to be moments where there are other things that are on their mind. Maybe a family member has a sickness of some kind. Maybe there's a financial issue going on. Maybe there's a dispute between the husband and the wife, and one of them comes to you and brings some small piece of that to you. And you might say, well, I don't want to get involved in the middle of that argument. Yeah, that may be so, but there's nothing wrong with listening and simply allowing the person to vent. So in addition to the transactional needs that we certainly want to serve at any time, we want to be sensitive to other things that a client might need from us at a given moment in time. They might need reassurance. They might need to know that the course that they've taken, that they're unsure about, is a good course for them to be taking. Or they might need to vent. Maybe they're frustrated about something within the process of selling the house or in something else in their life. They need to vent and they're coming to you because they have something that they just need to get off their chest. Maybe they need a personal connection. Maybe they had some bad news and they just need to share it with somebody. Can you imagine, I mean, this is an extreme example, but can you imagine if a client comes to you and says, my wife just got diagnosed with cancer, and you say, that's too bad. Boy, I'm hungry. I think I'll go to McDonald's and get an Egg McMuffin. Would you like one? Again, we're creating a tremendous experience of disconnect. That's how the client's going to experience it. And so when they want to have that personal connection, whether it's about their son scoring 2 goals, or it's a picture that their kid just drew in school, or some promotion that they just got, it's so important for you to recognize that that's where they are at that moment. And that's what they need from you. Don't ever forget that when someone initiates a conversation, it's because they need or want something from the person on the other side. So your opportunity is to understand what's the nature of their need and then respond to it. And if you stick only to the transactions, you're going to be missing the most important opportunities you have to create a powerful experience. And you can think about how this plays out in your own life. Think of all the doctors that you've had. You've probably had a lot of doctors who are perfectly competent, very good at what they're doing, no problem with knowing what pill to prescribe or what exercise regimen or whatever. But there's probably one doctor or two doctors that you've really felt special about because you had some kind of a special experience with them. They're the ones that you keep going back to about things that aren't even their specialty. Or maybe you travel a long distance to just keep going to that doctor, even though there's lots of doctors that are nearer to you. Same thing with perhaps your hairdresser. You've had a lot of hairdressers in your life, but there's one that you have this special relationship with. It's something about the personal side of the relationship that's beyond the simple transactional piece of the nature and the expertise that they have. And if you can be there with the client when they need you to be there, they're the ones that are going to refer you 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years later. Okay, let's go to some, so what does this mean? Sorry, one question. What does this mean for you? Go ahead, Adriana. What does this mean for you, all of this that we've been talking about up to now? The point is, it's important to be that empathetic listener when the situation arises. If you miss that opportunity and it goes over your head, you're simply going to be another capable operator, and you're not going to be that person whose relationship they treasure.